Hello, Christina Simmons here, and happy Valentine's Day. I know for a lot of people, Valentine's Day can be like this completely stressful, really difficult time. And I think it's important. I kind of was beginning last week, I talked about stress and anxiety and how the saints are, help us be able to point ourselves towards God and be able to reduce that stress and anxiety, but also sharing the fact that they too suffered with stress and anxiety, as just like all of us do. So one of the things I wanted to kind of continue, but Valentine's Day is a perfect day for us to really focus upon healthy relationships and what that looks like, and also effectively being able to cope with stress and anxiety that might come, especially in the midst of our relationships. So one of the first things I wanted to do was just, put out there the fact that for all of us, what does all of this have to do with our striving for holiness? Well, very simply, we're made in the image and likeness of God. That means that we are precious, and also the fact that we are a gift. God gave us ourselves. And what he desires for us is to learn through time, through relationship with him, which is prayer, and also through receiving his grace, how to make a total gift of ourself. The only way we can make a full gift of ourselves is by mastering who it is that we are, so that we can healthily, in a healthy way, interact with others. Our relationships are where we are able to make this gift of ourselves. Valentine's Day, of course, is this time when tons of gifts are being done. Gifts of flowers, gifts of chocolate, gifts of romantic gifts of, perhaps a personal letter or a song, or there's all sorts of different things. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to, in some way, make a gift of ourselves to another. And we can't do that, though, if we ourselves are disordered, or if we are having an unhealthy relationship in our own lives, not with another person necessarily, but just with ourselves. How many of us have addictions? How many of us have, predilections towards particular things that we know are not healthy for us, but yet we still do them? And usually it's because these are the coping strategies that we have developed over time when we are confronted with stress and anxiety. And what we have to do is we have to learn how, with God's help, we can create more effective coping habits. So instead of us turning, for example, to entertainment to distract us, or food or drink to to comfort us, or there's a myriad of other ways that are basic coping mechanisms in the face of stress or anxiety. And instead of doing those things, we're actually able to healthily respond and be able to then master ourselves, which then gives us the ability to gift ourselves, to fully give of ourselves. This is what the body is. St. John Paul II speaks about it at length in Theology of the Body, about the fact that we are embodied souls, and it's impossible for us to go through this life without our bodies making visible what is already in our lives, the invisible reality of our self, of our soul. Our body makes that visible. So when we understand that, then what happens is that then when we are entering into prayer, we see that it's not just some obligation that we have with God, but rather we're turning to the one who created us so that he can inform us and help us come to know ourselves more deeply, as well as come to know him more deeply, but to be known and to be loved. One of the biggest challenges that many of us have along our own faith journey is the fact that we might know a lot about God, but we don't know God. And there is a big difference. There's a difference between knowing about someone and knowing someone. The same thing holds for us. A lot of people knowing about us and knowing us. And usually there's an anxiety or a stress about people coming to know us, or we're convinced that if they did know us for real, then they wouldn't like us, that they would reject us, that they would not love us. And how perfect on Valentine's Day to talk about how it is that we can create these coping mechanisms, to use a more psychological, term, rather, than the reality that all of what we're doing, our coping plan, our plan of life, should include these things in order to help us continue to grow in our capacity to give more and more of ourselves. Not out of, and not be selfish, not be giving in order to get something in return. This is not a bartering system. Rather, this is a self-donation, a free offering of ourselves to another. And we begin this with making sure that we are spiritually and mentally healthy. And we have to realize that prayer is about union with God. And when we have union with Him, that does not necessarily mean that we won't have mental struggles, that we won't have, we won't be confronted with depression or with anxiety or an overburdening of stress. It doesn't mean we're not going to have these things in our lives. So, but it is the foundation upon which we have to build. So prayer is a non-negotiable. It's why whenever I work with people in spiritual mentoring and direction, I always begin with, what does your prayer life look like? What is your day of time with our Lord? What does that look like? And do you know God, or do you just know about God? He desires that personal relationship with each and every one of us. And He knows each of us by name, but many times we don't think that, we don't believe that, and we need to spend the time so that we can have that encounter with Him, so He can encounter us, call us by name, and then we know that we are loved. And from this foundation, we then are able to engage with others in our lives. So one of the biggest challenges we have, of course, is stress and anxiety. Our bodies were built to respond. Fight or flight are the two basic ones. And our body doesn't know the difference between we ran into a bear in the woods and we're running for our lives, or work stress, some project that's coming up that we have to do. And our bodies will respond similarly. So we need to make sure that we are being intentional about, cultivating healthy habits in our life. When we do this, when we're getting enough sleep, when we're exercising, when we are attending to all of these fundamental things that help us be able to respond well in a crisis, then we are training our brains to not freak out and be anxious, but rather that they're going to cope in the midst of, in the midst of these challenges that we will face. So our life of prayer and participation in the sacraments, we need God's grace. We can't do this without Him. And whenever we try to do it without Him, this is why we run into all sorts of issues, right? And we can look around the world, and we can even look in our own lives. I can do for myself, and we can see where when we were being self-reliant, thinking that we had to do it all on our own, then that's where we started to run into serious issues. And we would usually turn to things that were not good coping plans. We would go out perhaps and we'd party too much, or we would sleep too long, or there's just a whole myriad of different things. So the fact is that we need to be attentive. So a lot of the things that we do as part of the spiritual life actually have a mental health benefit, and it's good for us to recognize these. So not only, for example, having that life of prayer, of where we come to be known and know that we are loved, also like praying a rosary or a Divine Mercy Chaplet. In the midst of those prayers, the psychological term is object focus. What we're doing is that we're focusing on something other than ourselves, the physical beings, the gospel stories, which are the mysteries. And what it does is it quiets the racing thoughts going on in our mind. It gives us something else to focus on so that our anxiety doesn't go. Another thing is just this idea of, for example, offering it up. to make sacrifice, to love others. This is what offering it up is. Offering it up is very simply when we are making things new by uniting our sufferings with Christ. Christ made all things new through the cross, and we can do the same. And the psychological term for this is reframing. So we're changing our perspective. We're reframing what it is that we're going through from a perspective of, I am able to bring good out of it, just as Christ brought good out of his death, and and we have the resurrection, so we too can, when we unite with him, do the same thing. And when we do this, we can give an intention. We can say, Lord, I'm offering this up for my child who is away from the church, or I'm offering it up for Sally, who's going through a difficult time in the wake of a miscarriage, perhaps, or, there's all sorts of things. But for us to name those things and to know that as we are giving of ourselves, offering ourselves, making this gift of ourselves out of love for others, then again, this is having benefits for us. So again, let me just recap. What are the things that we need to be about so that we can be having these healthy relationships, and so that on a day like Valentine's Day, it is seen as an opportunity for us to give of ourselves and to love others and to let them know how much they are loved. The things we need to be about are, of course, prayer, coming to the sacraments, coming to confession at least once a month, and then striving to grow in virtue. These are the foundation upon which it is we then are able to abandon ourselves to God's will. And other practices that will help us and will have great benefits are things like Bible studies, being a part of our group, receiving spiritual direction or mentorship. Absolutely key, because that person is able to hear what's going on, and they are able to more easily reframe for you or see for you what is actually going on or could be going on. Spiritual reading, community service, corporal spiritual works of mercy. We're getting ready to head into Lent, and here we go. The prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. I already mentioned before, getting good sleep, spending time in exercise, things around your house, for example, doing cleaning, cooking, all of these are good things because they bring about order, they bring about peace, so that you are not feeling that stress and anxiety. Spending time intentionally in silence, so just turning off everything and spending time in silence. Journaling, checking in with friends. All of these things are wonderful. Walks, runs, gardening, landscaping, even mowing the lawn. All of these things can bring about great benefits, so that when we feel that stress, when we feel that anxiety, we are able to respond in a healthy way, because we're able to give of ourselves, because we have been given to by God through his grace, through his gifts to us. He has allowed us in the circumstances of our lives, by us being intentional, that we are able to receive those gifts. And then when we do, then we're able to pour ourselves out as gift for another. So that is my prayer for you today, is that you are able to pour yourself out to another or for others in the way that God desires for you, in a healthy way, in which you're able to celebrate the great love that God has for you and you experience, and you're able to share that love and that grace with others as well. So happy Valentine's Day. I pray that this has served you. And if you're looking for ways to be able to prepare for Lent, for example, go to sayyestoholiness.com, check out the online courses, and there you can sign up for either the 40-day challenge, which is a way to incorporate Lectio Divina into your daily prayer time, or the First Things First online course is a great way for you to be able to prioritize and order your life properly, so that way you're able to live the life of abundance that God desires for you. Have a great day, everybody, and God bless.